For those who aren't familiar with them, Game & Watches were little handhelds released by Nintendo in the 1980s and early 90s. They were pretty small, portable, and featured very basic controls with a non-backlit screen. I'd compare them to the Tiger Electronics line of handhelds if you're familiar with those, but done a little bit better. Most of them were just this single screen device that you see here, but some of the more advanced models actually had two screens connected by a hinge in the middle. If this design looks kind of familiar to you, it's because it was actually the inspiration for the Nintendo DS. And that also carried over to the 3DS, where the influence can still be seen. Following the success of the Legend of Zelda series on the NES, they released Game & Watch Zelda. Unlike most of the other games in the Legend of Zelda series, this one has barely ever seen a re-release. You're probably looking at upwards of $500 for a working unit in good condition. Several Game & Watch games were re-released as a series of tiny keychains, so if you ever wanted to try playing this game on the tiniest non-backlit screen known to man, you do have that option, but you're still going to be dishing out a couple $100. Nintendo did release a new Zelda Game & Watch to celebrate 35 years of The Legend of Zelda. However, this should not be mistaken for the original Zelda Game & Watch. It doesn't even have the original game on it. Basically, that leaves just one option. Nintendo did eventually start re-releasing the Game & Watch games as compilations for their Game Boy line of systems in Game & Watch Gallery 4 for the Game Boy Advance. If you get to 160 stars, you unlock a playable version of the Game & Watch Zelda. In terms of playing it on a legitimate game console other than the original handheld, this is pretty much your only option. Actually getting all those stars and unlocking the game in Game & Watch Gallery 4 is an achievement on its own. It took me longer to unlock this than it did to beat most Zelda games I'll be covering in this series.